Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Big Ten preseason media poll rankings come out, and Dill, as college football fans, this is the best time to all just come together and lay into the media preseason poll rankings. I know every single person that's listening to this has some sort of problem with these rankings. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. We're going to dive into some of our biggest problems with the rankings, but also I want to highlight some teams that I think the Big Ten media is certainly sleeping on heading into 2024. Fired up to get into this conversation. Before we do, just want to say thank you to you guys. The amount of support y'all have shown the fellas heading into the 2024 college football season. It's been absolutely amazing. Can't thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, let it fly in the comment section. And Dill, without further ado, let's get into this one. Let's start with our biggest problems that we have with these media poll rankings. I'll give you the T-box. What you got?
Yeah, and it can't be 1 and 2. I mean, whether you put Oregon, whether you put Ohio State, it's really hard to split those two teams off. Both super complete, super talented, right up there with anyone in the country. So I have no issue putting those two at 1 and 2 in the order. Dealer's choice, if you will. Where I think it gets a little hairy for me for what the Big Ten media is doing is just this idea that Michigan's the clear number 4. And I'm a Michigan fan. So yeah, there's certainly probably some level of bias. But I think you look, both defenses are going to be really good. I see it hard to put anyone really above Michigan's defense this year. You see what's coming back with Will Johnson, Mason Graham, Kenny Grant, the defensive ends both returning, Derek Moore and Josiah Stewart. I mean, big time football players. Makari Page shouldn't leave him out. So you got a loaded defense coming back. And then on the offensive side, they both certainly have some questions, but I kind of think they both have X factors that they're kind of leaning on or hoping on that puts them, if those two things respectively pan out, and that's Colton Nickey for Penn State and Alex Orji for Michigan. If either of those two units surprise on the upside, they get really, really close to Oregon and Ohio State. I just think, again, Michigan, I look at that defense, I give them an edge over Penn State right now. In splitting that offense down, I think it's really, really hard to do.
Yeah, my problem also with the Michigan-Penn State is you look at Michigan and Penn State, I look at this Michigan team and say the recipe for how Michigan just won a national championship less than 7 months ago is still the recipe. It's still a present recipe heading into 2024, right? We are going to run the football and play really good defense. You noted the defense. I mean, there are legitimate top 10 NFL draft guys on this Michigan defense, right? Mason Graham on the inside, Will Johnson on the outside. Those are two guys that are probably the best players at their position groups respectively. This Michigan defense is going to be a top 5 defense in the country, at least in my mind. Then you go to the offensive side of the football. I think a lot of casual college football fans might look at Michigan's offense and say it's going to take a step back when you lose a top 10 NFL draft pick in J.J. McCarthy. You lose your whole entire offensive line. Okay, I understand that a casual football fan might think that. If you're wearing a media credential around your neck, you should know dang well that Michigan develops offensive linemen just about as good as anybody in the country. And you look at the Michigan offensive line and what it's going to be like. It's so many guys that have been within this Michigan program for the last 3 to 4 years. And so if you just kind of trust this Michigan development in terms of the offensive line, we said it 12 months ago. You look at the 2 deep within that Michigan offensive line in 2023, it's chock full with guys that would have been starters on a lot of Power 5 programs across the country. So I feel pretty dang good that the Michigan offensive line is going to be solid. And then Alex Orji at the quarterback spot might even enhance what Michigan can do as a rushing offense in 2024.
No, I don't think it's obvious. I don't want to get up here and say Michigan's head and shoulders better than Penn State. I just think, again, the fact that everybody else seems to think it's obvious the other direction, I think it's a little crazy because, again, I mean, Penn State has some X factors. I know we talked about some first-round talent on the Michigan defense. They got that too. I mean, Winston at that safety spot, really, really great player. Obviously, Abdul Carter is one of the better defensive players in all the country. And then at the end of the day, if Colton Nickey gets that offense rolling and they can inject some creativity into that offense and they can get more out of Drew Allar, who obviously when they play big teams, he has really, really struggled. I mean, Penn State can be right there with Oregon and Ohio State. I think that's where you can kind of get to if Colton Nickey and that offense can get rolling. But again, I think Michigan can probably make the same argument. If Alex Orji surprises on the upside, Michigan's not that far off either.
You talk about one of the biggest, not like one of the biggest storylines that nobody's talking about is Coach Koldenicki taking over this Penn State offense. I mean, I've been extremely vocal over the last 24 months that what Coach Koldenicki, did at Kansas, it was one of the better offensive coordinator jobs that we saw in the country, consistently putting safeties in an absolute pickle. Now, if he can bring that creativity to this Penn State offense that was just one of the most bland offenses that you saw in the country in 2023, that's a massive story for Penn State, who one has a very easy schedule in 2024, but more importantly, they have the pieces on the offensive side of the football. I mean, Drew was a 5-star prospect coming out of high school. They have two of the better running backs in the country coming back. The pieces are in place. If he can kind of ignite that fire within that Penn State offense, we said it last year, Penn State had a serviceable offense in 2023. That was one of the most dangerous teams in all of college football. I still believe that in 2024. So if Coach Koldenicki can get it going, and this Penn State team, you better watch out. Now, going to my second problem with this list, I want to dive into Iowa and USC. I look at Iowa and USC, kind of polar opposite teams, right? One, you look at one of the best offenses in the country. One's one of the best defenses in the country. How do those two teams stack up? I think the big question is, what coordinator change do you have a little bit more confidence in? Dan Lynn at USC or what Iowa's done on the offensive side of the football? I have a little bit more confidence in Dan Lynn turning around this USC defense because I think the talent is certainly there for USC on defense. But more importantly, we just saw Dan Lynn do the exact same thing at UCLA in the 2023 season, where I look at Iowa and say, I love that you're making a change at the offensive coordinator spot. The talent on the Iowa offensive side of the football is still not that great. They just haven't recruited the offensive skill positions at a high enough level to have a very good offense. So you're telling me, what program do I trust more to make those big steps where they need to take those steps? I'm trusting USC, and for that reason, USC is my number 5 team in the Big Ten heading into the 2024 year.
And I personally don't have a huge issue with having Iowa over USC, just because, again, I think both have glaring weaknesses in a sense. Where my issue, frankly, comes in is I think.
Wait, hold on. Before you go, because I know you're going to go to your team, Wisconsin. I want to ask you. Oh, you're getting a little. I'm gonna press you a little bit. USC Iowa neutral field. Who are you taking?
I think that's really, really tight. I think, again, Iowa's defense is going to be unbelievable. I think you look at how much is coming back on that side of the ball, especially in that secondary. I think they can really put the clamps on teams. And again, if you really just commit to running the ball, I still think USC needs to show me that they can stop that for 4 quarters. So I think that's a tight game. I think I probably would put USC a little bit higher, because I do think that they have more avenues to win, just given the fact that they can hit big explosive plays and they can turn things on a dime. And I mean, Iowa's offense, we keep getting sold this every year. It's going to get better. Cade McNamara, he's going to get it better. And just everything that they've kind of tried has really fallen flat. And I'm with you. They didn't really bring the type of talent in that you need to play high-level offensive football at the end of the day. So I probably lean USC. It's much tighter than you think it. I think than you think it is. So I have no issue with that. I think Wisconsin, I think that's a far more complete team than either of those teams, especially if Tyler Van Dyke plays consistent good football. Because again, his only issue is he's like a roller coaster. I mean, you've seen really, really good play, and then you've seen really, really bad play. But if he plays good football for them, I think they have enough talent on the offensive side of the ball, especially led by Will Pauling. And then you look at that defense, it should be really, really pretty good. So I think Wisconsin, frankly, is a more complete team than either of those teams. I have them at 5.
Wisconsin might have the least amount of question marks out of those 3 teams. I just, at the end of the day, look at this USC team and say the game of football is who can score the most points. And I just look at USC and say, I just trust that team score more points than a team like Iowa, than a team like Wisconsin. Now, I will caveat, Wisconsin is an intriguing team because
Wisconsin could put up points on USC. I mean, they're not Iowa's offense.
If Tyler Van Dyke, you talk about X factors, like we've seen Tyler Van Dyke play some really dang good football. If he can kind of find that at Wisconsin in 2024, that's a really dangerous team. I think you can say the exact same thing for Nebraska, where Nebraska just gets better at all the positions they needed to get better at, right? They were dreadful at the quarterback spot. They were dreadful in the pass catcher room. They bring in guys like Isaiah Nair and Jamal Banks. They obviously bring in true freshman Dylan Rolla. I'm okay with him being there at 8 right now because they do have a true freshman quarterback coming into the Big Ten. That being said, that's a team that you could certainly kind of see skyrocket up these power rankings if we see Dylan Raiola put it together as a true freshman, who I have a lot of confidence that he will, because that kid's just a gamer. Like, he was born to play the quarterback position. You go Rutgers at 9.
No
hey,
issues.
I kind of called him, and I don't mean to be like offensive to the Rutgers fans, but like kind of a poor man's Michigan. Like, they're just going to run the football and play good defense, and they have gotten that roster to the point where they can be one of the more physical teams along the line of scrimmage. They have a phenomenal running back. That's going to be a tricky team for a lot of these Big Ten teams. You go to Washington at 10. I kind of at this second, the bottom, I wouldn't say bottom half, but these last 8 teams, where do you want to dive into in terms of how about highlighting teams that you think are being a little bit undervalued?
I think can sneaky be a little bit more dangerous than people think is UCLA. Like, I don't like they're coming off and they got a lot of changeover and things going on, but I love the coaching staff they bring. And I think Eric Bieniemy arguably is too good of an offensive coordinator to be at UCLA in this moment. And UCLA is a really, really good job.
Ricochet shot at UCLA there.
It's just like, it feels like at this moment, I'm a little surprised he took that job coming from the NFL. But again, UCLA can be a really good program. They just need the right guy. I think Deshaun Foster is the right guy to inject some energy. And at the end of the day, I think I look at the defensive side of the ball for them. They have enough pieces. They have NFL players on that side of the ball. If they can get some manufactured pass rush, if you will, from some of those new transfers they brought in, I think they can be a tough team. And I think their ceiling, frankly, is a little bit higher than some of these other teams, because I do think there's a better rock of talent with some playmakers on offense led by Sturdivant. I think this team can be better. And again, Northwestern, Illinois, and Minnesota are always tough teams to rank, because like Northwestern, I wouldn't have thought won a game last year, then played really, really well, capping off a win against Utah in the bowl. But I think UCLA probably has a higher ceiling than that number 15 spot.
So digging into that Eric Bieniemy take, again, complete ricochet shot at the UCLA fans. I look at Eric Bieniemy, and I kind of get what you're saying in terms of like 12 months ago, we were talking about him being a head coach in the NFL, and now you get him as your offensive coordinator at UCLA. I think UCLA fans should be fired up.
Yeah, that's why I don't think it's such a ricochet shot. It's like Eric Bieniemy is a really, really good coach, and it surprises me that he's taking the OC job from a first-year head coach.
Yeah, one of the teams that you can say like these teams are fascinating: UCLA, Michigan State, Washington, Indiana, kind of some new coaches coming in. I look at Michigan State and say, end of 2024, where are we power ranking Aiden Childs as a quarterback in the Big Ten? Because I think there's a reality where we're talking about Aiden Childs being a top 5 quarterback in the Big Ten. If that is the case, I mean, this Michigan State team can be extremely dangerous. If there's a new head coach coming in that I trust to win football games, it's Jonathan Smith taking over in Michigan State. That's going to be a complete change of gears from the Mel Tucker era. I have a ton of confidence.
To me, it's like, can they get that offensive line going, and do they have the weapons on the edge? Because that's where I look. I don't think they're going to be able to pound the ball on teams. I like their running back room. I think that's a really strong part of that team. But the offensive line, big question marks, and then who's going to make plays on the boundary for them to kind of mask some of that. That UCLA, again, I don't think UCLA's got the creme de la creme of offensive lines, but I do think there are a couple guys in the boundary who can make things happen. That's what I'm thinking for Michigan State. They have the quarterback of the future in a sense, and the guy you're certainly excited about, but who's going to be able to help him out?
Yeah, Aiden Childs is he's got to be. I was talking with one of our buddies, a Michigan State fan, and shout out Ma, and we kind of said, Aiden Childs is one of the most just purely talented quarterbacks Michigan State has seen in the last 2 decades. And Michigan State's had some good quarterbacks, but Aiden Childs has some serious talent. That'll probably do it for me, Dill. Again, it's when you get to
Maryland also might be kind of good. They looked awesome in the bowl game against Auburn. And I know they're losing some guys, but that's a team. Mike Loxley's doing a sneaky, really good job there.
Yeah, and you talk about a team that benefits from getting out of the Big Ten East and having to play Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State every single year. Like, yeah, that's going to be Maryland. I think that's going to be reflected in the record. That was just one of those teams that, again, there was an argument that you put them in the Big Ten West for the last couple of years. They're probably
they're right there. They're in the thick and thin of it every year. So
yeah, 100%. And again, towards the end of this Big Ten with all these new coaches, new regimes, it's kind of hard to stack them. I like the UCLA shot up. I think they do have and they're really a veteran group. Like, you kind of take a look at their depth chart. It's seniors, redshirt juniors. So I think the floor is relatively high.
Now there's I don't know that the floor is incredibly high for UCLA because again, the questions you have with their offensive line and some in their defensive line, frankly, too, especially at that edge spot. Like there are some big ones. Cornerback play, is that going to be good enough? UCLA certainly has some avenues to kind of get themselves ranked at 15, but I do think there's a world where that UCLA team's tougher for a team like USC, Wisconsin, Nebraska than maybe like Illinois or Minnesota.
100%. I agree, because you look at Illinois, Minnesota, and say how good can they be in 2024?
Like they'll be what they are every year, like good, solid, tough, physical teams. But the ceiling always feels like they got to find some way to raise it a little bit.
I agree with that. All right, we'll cut it there. Again, would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. Fascinating discussion. If you agree with us, let us know. If you disagree with us, let it fly in the comment section. That's the beauty of doing these ranking previews. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. We'll talk to y'all later.